Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. President Donald Trump imposes fresh tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China starting today, sending global markets into shock. The three nations retaliate with their own tariffs against the U.S. France refuses to seize frozen Russian assets to fund Europe's military spending. President Emmanuel Macron says seizing Russian assets would breach international agreements. Arab leaders meet in Cairo to discuss an alternative plan to President Donald Trump's proposal of the United States controlling Gaza. The Arab-backed plan sidelines Hamas from ruling over Gaza. Over 50,000 Cubans protest against the United States military base in Guantanamo Bay. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez attended the demonstration. An intense rainfall and flooding displaces over 150,000 in Peru's capital, Lima. The government has declared a state of emergency in 20 of the 24 provinces. We begin in Washington, where President Donald Trump has asked the state and Treasury departments to draft a list of sanctions that the United States has placed on Russia that could be lifted. This is the latest in President Donald Trump's effort to improve diplomatic and economic relations with Moscow. However, it's not immediately clear what the White House would seek in return for any relief on sanctions. The move comes after President Donald Trump ended all military aid to Ukraine, taking Washington-Kyiv ties to an all-time low.
I'll tell you what, I think it takes two to tango, and you're going to have to make a deal with Russia, and you're going to have to make a deal with Ukraine. You're going to have the assent, and you're going to have the consent from the European nations, because I think that's important, and from us. I think everybody has to get into a room, so to speak, and we have to make a deal. And the deal can be made very fast. It should not be that hard a deal to make. It can be made very fast. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal. And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long because I believe that Russia wants to make a deal.
Now, many are accusing President Donald Trump of cozying up to Putin, who started the war by invading Ukraine 3 years ago. Relations between the United States and Russia have been frosty since the end of World War II, but Putin's entry into politics in the year 2000 has been pivotal in upending U.S.-Russia relations. President Bill Clinton was the first to reach out to Putin, but found the Russian leader cold yet competent. President George W. Bush increased meetings with Putin over his 8-year presidency and even drove Putin around his ranch in a pickup truck. However, Putin then invaded the European nation of Georgia in 2008, which ended his relations with President Bush. Though President Barack Obama and Putin were often seen sharing jokes and laughs, in 2012, relations between the two leaders turned frosty after Putin annexed Crimea in 2014. The détente came when President Trump took office and met Putin in 2017, and the two met at least 5 times during the first Trump term. However, when President Joe Biden came into office, relations with Russia turned more confrontational after Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022. And now, with President Trump back in office, he's again trying to mend relations with the Russian leader who started a war every single time there was a different president in the White House, with the exception of Donald Trump himself.
I can only say you can go back to Bush, you can go back to Obama, and go back to Biden. They took a lot. The only one they didn't get, you know what I gave them? I gave them anti-tank missiles. That's what I gave them. I gave them sanctions on Russia. Let me tell you, we have to make a deal because there are a lot of people being killed that shouldn't be killed. But remember, Trump gave them nothing, and the other presidents gave them a lot. They gave them everything. So, you know, I really, Putin is the one that will tell you this has not been so good for them. The fact is that I just want fairness. I want fairness. But think of it. I gave Russia nothing except grief. I gave them nothing. I gave them sanctions and javelins. That's what I gave them.
Now, it's unclear whether President Trump's approach towards Putin could end the war, or will it just buy more time for Russia to launch another major conflict? President Zelensky was once the face of defiance, a wartime hero standing between Ukraine and Russian tyranny. But behind closed doors, the cracks are now beginning to show. After a heated showdown with President Donald Trump in Washington, the Ukrainian president finds himself caught in a dangerous game. Aid is frozen with Washington retreating, and now Elon Musk, the commander-in-chief's unpredictable megaphone, has branded the Ukrainian president not just desperate, but evil. The world's richest man has also suggested that President Zelensky should be offered some kind of amnesty to bring democracy back to Ukraine. Our next report has more.
Elon Musk has never been the one to sit quietly. Not when the world is on fire, and especially not when his buddy Donald Trump is locked in a diplomatic showdown.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
Over the weekend, Trump and Zelensky clash made headlines around the world. While some showered support on the Ukrainian leader, there were some who agreed with President Trump, claiming that the Biden-era golden boy has to be thankful and that it was time for peace. At the White House, Zelensky walked in seeking billions. But unfortunately, he walked out with nothing but cold stares and a warning from Trump: you won't be around very long.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
And now, after the entire fiasco, Trump's billionaire buddy Musk has entered the fray. The richest man, whose influence now stretches far beyond rockets and electric cars, did what he does best: fired off a few explosive posts on X. Zelensky wants a forever war, a never-ending graft meat grinder. This is evil. These words from Musk hung in the air like gun smoke, and it wasn't just a hot take, it was a signal. Now, it is no secret that for months Trump had grown tired of Zelensky's defiance. The Ukrainian leader wanted more weapons, more money, more promises, but Trump was clear. He wanted a deal, and that too fast.
He didn't want to do about ceasefire. A ceasefire could take place immediately. A contract, if you want to end the war, you sign up an agreement. That's going to take a period of time. It takes time.
Now, the following day, Zelensky flew to Europe, hoping to shore up support. But even there, the mood had shifted. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer pledged more defense spending, but only if the US stayed in the fight. France's Emmanuel Macron called for NATO countries to dig deeper, but the numbers didn't add up. Everyone knew the truth. Without America's backing, Ukraine's war effort was running out of steam. And Musk wasted no time pressing the knife in deeper. True, he'd replied to a post calling Zelensky a dictator. He knows if the war ends, his power ends. The idea, as brutal as it sounds, was hinted time and again by Trump. But now Musk was saying it outright. The war wasn't just about Ukraine's survival anymore, it was about Zelensky's spotlight. And the timing couldn't have been worse for Kiev. The US was already dangling a minerals deal, a lifeline of rare earth resources in exchange for cash and economic guarantees. Zelensky bristled at the idea, refusing to sign unless Ukraine's security was guaranteed, and that gamble backfired spectacularly when Trump pulled the plug on aid.
The president has been clear that he is focused on peace. We need our partners to be committed to that goal as well. We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure that it is contributing to a solution.
Meanwhile, European leaders scrambled to stitch together a new ceasefire proposal, a temporary truce, no more missile strikes on power plants or civilian infrastructure. But Zelensky stood his ground. Ukraine would not bow to Russia. He insisted, not now, not ever. But behind the defiant speeches and furrowed brows, the walls were closing in. The headlines painted him as a hero. The whispers called him something else entirely. And now Musk had given the world a new word: evil. The war that once made Zelensky the face of freedom might soon become the very thing that undoes him. If peace is on the table, how long can the hero refuse to take it before he becomes the villain?
And now moving to Europe, as the United States cuts military aid to Ukraine, Europe is taking charge and extending support to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Both France and the United Kingdom have promised to continue sending military aid to Kyiv. In addition, European NATO allies are now arming themselves as they brace for President Donald Trump's possible reduction in aid to the alliance. This comes after the commander-in-chief repeatedly threatened to stop U.S. guarantees to Europe if all NATO members do not increase their military spending. However, the United States is bound by NATO Chapter 5, which states that NATO allies have to defend each other in the case of an attack. Meanwhile, Sweden is turning to Germany for advanced air-launched long-range cruise missiles for its Gripen fighter jets. Named the Taurus, these missiles can be used for conducting deep strikes into Russian territory. The Swedish Air Force is also updating its doctrine on how it intends to retaliate if Russia expands the war in Ukraine towards Europe. Meanwhile, the European Union has called for a massive surge in defense manufacturing.
And indeed, tomorrow I will inform the member states through a letter about the Rearm Europe plan. We need a massive surge in defense without any question. We want lasting peace, but lasting peace can only be built on strength. And strength begins with strengthening ourselves. And that is the purpose of the plan that I will present to the member states tomorrow, the Rearmed Europe.
Everyone is also convinced that Europe has to take on more responsibility and start bearing the burdens associated with building a defense industry, increased aid for Ukraine during the war, and greater spending within NATO on their defense budgets.
Now, since joining NATO in March of last year, Sweden has increased its military interactions and deployments with other European allies. In fact, just last month, Sweden hosted large-scale military drills simulating cross-border assaults and strikes.
It's going on a NATO operation in the Baltic Sea called Baltic Sentry, with a focus on protecting critical infrastructure on the bottom, as well as working against hybrid threats. And it's a large group of vessels in the Baltic Sea with substandard, who makes a threat for sea safety and also for the environment. And we must have the ability to act fast and forcefully at sea and or at a harbor like this, together with other authorities, that working together in an operation, and that's what we're training right here.
And now, as President Donald Trump cuts back support for Ukraine, European allies are stepping up in a major way, not only to protect the lives of millions, but also to ensure the legitimacy of a democratic and rules-based world. And pivoting back to the United States, as President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown picks up steam, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has reported a massive jump in arrests by ICE agents. Secretary Noem said ICE arrests jumped a staggering 627% from last year in President Trump's first month in office. She added that ICE arrested over 20,000 illegal immigrants in a month, compared to around 33,000 arrests under former President Joe Biden for all of last year. Secretary Noem said, and I quote, "President Trump and this administration are saving lives every day because of the actions we are taking to secure the border and deport illegal alien criminals. Hundreds of thousands of criminals were let into this country illegally. We are sending them home, and they will never be allowed to return," end quote. Though immigration authorities are making more arrests per day on average than they did under President Biden, data shows that ICE arrests have still not kept up with the goal set by the Trump administration. Initially, the Trump administration announced daily ICE arrests stood at over 1,000 per day, but in February, these numbers diminished. Recent data shows less than 600 arrests were made per day during the first 3 weeks of February. Immigration experts are now scrutinizing Secretary Noem's data, saying that the math is misleading because she's comparing total ICE arrests under the current administration with a smaller subset of arrests under another. Jason Hauser, a former chief of staff at ICE under the Biden administration, said Secretary Noem was comparing apples to coconuts to exaggerate the number of arrests. Along with the slow arrest, deportations of illegal migrants are also taking longer than promised by the Trump administration.
Well, a year and a half ago, we were in Peru. We were there for a year and 2 months, and from there we decided to come here looking for improvement, but we did not achieve it. Now we are going backwards. We are on our way back, and the situation that we faced, especially the jungle, wasn't good. We are here, we are going back to our country. It's not an improvement, but we have to return.
Now, we have to see the other situation on the rise, the migration flow from north to south. As you know, we are closely working specifically with our neighbor Costa Rica, who has become the entryway for this group of people who we have to help enter Panama while respecting their human rights. Up to now, 2,200 people have arrived from the north to the south.
And so are Noam's arrest claims about public safety legitimate or mere optics? And what is the Trump administration aiming for? And like Elon Musk's Doge, will the Homeland Security Department also be forced to redo the math? And today we end in Mexico. The cartel-controlled city of Culiacan stands at a breaking point. Rival factions of the deadly Sinaloa cartel have turned the city streets into a battleground. And residents are now begging for salvation, even if it comes from beyond their borders. Many have pinned their hopes on President Donald Trump to wage war on the cartels and finish the reign of drug lords. But can an outside force rescue a city so deeply entangled in cartel control? Our final report explores further.
Culiacan was once a place of vibrant life. Now it wakes to fear. Streets echo with the sounds of violence. And each day begins with uncertainty. Even phones light up with warnings of violence. This is the capital of Mexico's Sinaloa state, a city turned battleground.
Culiacan is no longer what it used to be. The limits have been exceeded. Never before have we seen so many people dead.
For 6 months, violence has suffocated the city. The Sinaloa cartel, once united, now fights itself after a sudden power struggle split the empire.
I ask my God that all this may be over, that there may be a settlement, that they may reach an agreement. Why are they killing each other? As if they had no faith in life.
As the cartel rivalry continues, the unwritten pact to protect civilians is broken, and innocent lives hang in the crossfire. More than 900 killings since September tell the story. Carjackings and kidnappings shadow daily life. Roadblocks appear without warning, manned by armed men scanning phones for rival connections.
When I go out in the streets, I entrust myself to God because of the way things are right now.
The current situation of high impact was triggered by the United States on July 25th, when one of the leaders of the criminal groups in Sinaloa was taken away.
As streets bear the weight of abandoned bodies, families continue their lookout in silence, too afraid to speak out. In the chaos, churches have become sanctuaries for the grieving. Walls plastered with faces of the missing tell stories of heartbreak. Never before have so many people vanished without a word. However, across the border, pressure from US President Donald Trump looms over the city, who has reignited the fight against the cartels and threatened to deploy special forces to eradicate the drug cartels.
We are going to unleash holy hell on the cartels. Enough is enough. We are securing our border, and the cartels are on notice.
There is an important part that they must play in their country. What's the final distribution on the streets? Aren't there cartels there? Or organized crime? We collaborate, coordinate, we meet and work together. But we will always defend our sovereignty.
Just last week, Mexico extradited 29 alleged drug cartel members to the United States, including high-profile gang leaders. The move, considered to be one of the biggest extraditions in Mexico's history, was seen as a major step in bilateral security relations between the two countries. And today, after President Trump declared to go forward with 25% tariffs on goods imported from Canada and Mexico into the United States, It remains to be seen what President Claudia Sheinbaum's Plan B, C, and D will be. Since Trump's tariff threats on Mexico, security forces in the country have tightened the crackdown. In December alone, over a ton of fentanyl was seized. In February, more than 100 synthetic drug labs were destroyed. Yet the cartels endure. And even though daily crackdowns weaken the factions, their roots run deep. Hope flickers beneath the violence, but fear remains the city's constant companion.
The government, the help from the United States, the help from Europe, international, whoever can help us. If our government cannot, then we have to lower our heads and be humble and ask for help. Because the truth is that it is overwhelming, and we do need someone to support us and resolve the situation.
But as fear tightens its grip on every street corner, one question lingers. Will Culiacan ever wake from this nightmare, or is the worst still to come?
That's First Post America for this Tuesday. I'm Eric Ham, signing off from our studios in Washington, D.C. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.